Welcome to the Flicks, Picks, and the Nitpicks. And I am, as always, your humble host, S01EP01. Let's get it, man. I guess you could tell them by the cadence in my voice that a lot's running through my head right now. And if you see the title, you know that this is the review of Black Mirror. I guess this is season 1, episode 1. Can I set the stage with you guys? Because this is already, I'm late to the party. So if you hear me taking my time, they might be like, y'all might be out there like, yeah, he's seen it. He's seen the first episode and he need a minute. First off, let me let you guys know something. I am a big fan of The Outer Limits, and as of late on this worldwide vacation, if you will, I've been just downloading or just trying to watch it. You know what I mean? Watch old episodes of Outer Limits. And I'm talking about like the 90s. I haven't really gotten into the black and whites. And the funny thing is, when the updated version came, when it came in the 90s, I remember watching that. And I wasn't even aware that there was a precursor to the series. It's basically a revamping of the series. No different than Twilight Zone. I was aware of Twilight Zone. I seen a couple on marathons around, what was it, New Year's, when they used to do that type of shit. But in any event, watching The Outer Limits, I always loved it. It was always like a hour long series, obviously with commercial breaks. So this runs really about the timing around like 45 to 47 minutes or so, something like that, 42 to 47 minutes each episode, once you account for all the commercials. And one thing that was always amazing about it, I actually was considering doing some reviews of the old series, is that they would take a concept of a story just like anything else and really, in such a short format, create an emotional roller coaster. And with respect to the budget, it's really all about acting and story, heavily acting and story driven, not so much the visuals. So the plot and the pacing is really what Outer Limits sold itself on. Well acted, well scripted, but even more so than that, creative stories. New story every episode. And if you really wanted to, you could have took any of those stories and really develop it into quite a thought-provoking film if you really want to take it that far. That said, let's enter Black Mirror, man. I was talking to one of my bros, and he was putting me on to Black Mirror, telling me about it and whatnot. But we was talking about a lot of other stuff. He was like, have you seen Black Mirror? And it was like, obviously it was the last time people brought up Black Mirror to me in the conversation. And I'm assuming it's because if you really listen to the type of stuff that I'm into and the creative and introspective type of storytelling, if you will, and even in terms of that, just the stuff that I watch, and I'm into, like I'm just interested in a lot of things, especially dealing and delving into human nature. So let's enter Black Mirror. Now, brief synopsis: this is basically a kidnapping in the UK of a princess, and we go over the storied day, if you will, of the prime minister who has to basically perform a certain act to get her released. And it's an act of like utter humiliation. But he has a short time to facilitate the act that the kidnapper lined him up for. And over the course of a few hours, we go through the emotional ramifications of making choices. And it really digs into how far are you willing to go. It really tests the limit of the human being and how it can still break you and everything you would have to deal with after the fact. It was a real intense watch. Not so much for me because I'm not in terms of like, oh man, I'm losing. It was just really like, yo, someone is really pushing that line. Really pushing the line. And it really expresses how there really is no winners. There's a game that we used to play way back in the day, and it was a corny little kid game, but as I look back to it as an adult, it really lets you know. It was a way of us to see everybody had a price. So basically, in a nutshell, would you do this for X amount of money? And you'd be like, nah. And you always choose something that would really like push the limit. And then you keep upping the money, upping the money, upping the money to see what is the person's price. And this episode really expresses what is the price for life. Now you might think, all right, you're the prime minister, the princess was kidnapped, and they want you to perform an act of humiliation live all over the world to be broadcast to release the princess. Now you might think like, what could you have to do that would release the princess from being a hostage? We'll get to that in just 1 second. But I want to keep this very light for those that have never seen it. And we're going to keep this portion basically just to let you know where I feel about the series. And I thought that it was well acted, well crafted, and well paced for it to be in such a dense amount of time to make you go through so much emotions to get there. But the thing that's very creative about this film is you get to see how everybody responded to it. And I personally was more disgusted with the response of the public as things were happening. It really displays, what's the best way that I could explain how ugly human beings can be. Now, I don't know if I missed the part because the way they partition it is like part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4 type thing. And I don't know if I saw the part 1, but I probably didn't see it flash. So I didn't realize. I thought when they said part 2, I thought that was a conclusion of it. And I was like, oh, you just ended it? So this is part 2? I just seen, so where was part 1? Because it started already game in play. Princess is going and we're talking to the Prime Minister about the ransom. So, but that's neither here nor there, because now I'm thinking they probably partitioned it and showed part 1 first, and I might have missed it when it flashed. I know the other times they left it out, it was a little bit more considerable, but I was in the middle of something, so maybe I just missed it, because I was like, yo, maybe I missed the beginning part. But in actuality, I saw the whole thing, and again, it's an emotional roller coaster. And it has you thinking about what would you do? What would you do? What is your price to force you into that type of position? And the choices that you have to make as a leader. The sacrifices you will have to make as a leader to appease the people that you lead. Down to the sacrifices that you would have to make in the name of what's best for the people. And it drew a lot of that out of them. Now, one thing I want to discuss is the pacing. The pacing was actually amazing. Everything that was leading up towards each interval that was making the clock get tighter and tighter before the eventual assassination of the princess. And the choices, the detailed choices in the mind state that the prime minister had to be in to make these decisions, even though it could risk his actions and or inactions would directly affect the princess, and by way of the princess, the nation that he is prime minister of. And once you see it to the very end, it makes you look at human beings like, wow, this is who we are. And at the very, very end, and I like how they peppered a lot more to see what happened after the fact, after everything concluded. The interaction, mostly with the prime minister and his wife, which is basically the extension of his family. And the things that would break a man to the point that his wife could never look at him again. And there was no way for him to win because she does not have a clue what he sacrificed. And the fucked up shit is, before I end it, is it also lets you know that trusting your gut blindly, because it's your gut, so your gut's not seeing, it's just telling you, versus anything else. Being coercion. Humiliation. And the deterioration of your personal self-respect. The question is, could you look in the mirror? Could you look in the mirror at yourself after the fact? And I think this story, disgusting, but totally creative in the way it postured itself to pull out all the information that you needed with a mild twist. And it's not mild, it would be very extensive, but the twist didn't even matter, because with or without the twist there, it just makes it even worse, because the prime minister still has to look himself in the mirror and still ask himself, did he do the right decision? Hindsight is always 20/20, but in the moment, did he do the decision? And this really shows you the pressure cooker of decision making, especially if you're within leadership. And I say that just being realistic, that you're still dealing with a human being that has family, people that love, care, respect about him on a personal level outside of the masses that he leads. And the ramifications of everything he had to do to appease everyone else at the expense of the intimate relationship he had with a woman that he actually loved, his wife. And what he did to protect not just the nation, little did she know, his family, her. And I do believe they may have had kids, but they weren't needed to be seen to move the story along. But that's just my personal review. But as always, you guys are really here for the picks and the nitpicks. So let's just do it. And this will be the spoilery section, because I cannot really spoil this show for you. And I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to cut a non-spoilery, but let me just end cap it at this point before we actually go into the next segment, the picks and the nitpicks, the spoilery portion. I will just want to leave you guys with this. Go see the first episode. If you've seen this and didn't watch it, but you just want to see a mild review about whether or not you should see it, you should. It really shows you how the ethics versus responsibility as a leader versus your own personal motivations. Not so much motivation, your own personal outlook, your own personal morals. And when your life, when a life I should say, and all the dominoes around it is at stake, that will still not only affect the person that's life hangs in the balance, but just your life in general, in terms of how you look in the mirror tomorrow. How do you get intimate with your wife? And most importantly, when you wake up in the morning and you go in the bathroom and you have to look yourself in the mirror. And now I can see why they would call it the Black Mirror. And that's it for the non-spoilery section. So please, you can stop, pause here, but make sure you come back in for the spoilery section, and we're going to chop it up. So, you guys see I'm giving you a minute now. Come back. All right. Now, we're here for the spoilery section. Now, let's get to it. First off, one of the major picks of this film is just the plot. The plot really is about a prime minister that has a choice as a leader of a nation, but the politics behind how do you get to that. And I think one of the biggest, well, let's just get into the spoilery set. Let's just get the spoilers out the way. This series, the plot that I didn't really want to discuss, and obviously in the non-spoilery, is that we find the prime minister has a decision to make in fulfilling the task of a ransom by someone who kidnapped the princess of the nation, and what the instructions he has to do to bring her back. And basically he has to fuck a pig. Yeah, no, I shit you not, fuck a legit pig. And as you go through, as he confers with all his advisors and his military arm, the leadership there, just so they could find and locate the princess without even having to deal with a terrorist. Which obviously his first answer was, I'm not fucking no pig. Let's just go find her. But now you have to balance everything with it, the politics of it. If I don't do this immoral act, not only does the princess die, it's still also a princess. The blood leader, if you will, quote unquote, of a nation. Of a nation that still allows her to wear that title. And the instructions were with no visual trickeries. You have to do it and we'll release her. That's it. No money, no nothing. And the clock is ticking because he had a short window of time to get it done. And with that being said, he actually performs the deed. The only reason why he performs the deed is because, obviously, they tried the insurgents and they tried to extract her. But because of the location, how it was up, the video of her being held captive was already uploaded to YouTube. So even everybody online and worldwide already knew what he had, the sexual act he had to perform in order to have her released. So now you start to see them charting the polling, saying that people feel you. You shouldn't do it. You shouldn't do it. You shouldn't do it until the finger was delivered. And once the finger was delivered, his polls start to drop. So he lost all the support for him to stand steadfast and not performing the sexual act, which also buys him a lot more time to do. His initial response to it was, get the military, let's figure out if we could find a location by way of signal tracing or whatever we have to do to figure out if we could locate the guy that did it. And when they did, and they entered the environment, it was a dummy. The only casualty was a nosy reporter that somehow, via sending pussy pics to people on the inside of the prime minister's camp, was able to get to the location where the princess was hidden, was held captive at, which turned out to be a decoy. And in noticing somebody else was in there, she tried to escape and she got shot at. She didn't die, but she got shot up in the leg, which was good for her dumbass for entering an environment in which her whole life was really at risk just so she could get a fucking scoop. But she lived. They shot the phone out. It was what it was. It was a small thing, but that's another thing that I wanted to express that's a pick. The deviancy of human beings. Like, that shit wasn't cute for her to have to go out of her way to get a goddamn scoop. It just really wasn't. And what it led to, a bullet in her leg, a few bullets in her leg. All because she took it upon herself to think that I need to enter an environment while you already knew. Because if it wasn't for someone on the inside letting you know that where they dispatched the for lack of a better way of talking it, the SWAT team that was gonna go extract her out, you wanted to sneak in through the back and all of that because you had inside intel and showed up by yourself and wanted to broadcast directly from your phone to your peoples at the news station your information. Those of which that didn't even agree with her even going out there putting herself in the line of fire because they actually knew that, yo, you're risking your life just to get a story. You know, like, what were you doing? That you don't have a crew. Because human beings don't care. It's a very self-absorbed attitude. It's all about me. What if you would have botched it and the princess would have died anyway, just by you showing up? But it didn't matter because it's all about me. Another interesting pick was the conversation between the prime minister and his wife. That I thought that was very interesting because she didn't want him to go and do that. It's humiliating. And he was like, I have to do it for the nation, the family. She was like, yeah, but you're my husband. And all she cared about was how it would look to her. For him to perform the sex act to bring the princess back. And on a very humane level, I totally understand. It's a very gray area with this. You know, that's why I'm really interested to see what your perspectives are down and below. Because as a woman, I can understand you look at your man to be your protector, yada, yada, yada. But he's on camera fucking a pig. You can't look at him the same. Your relationship will never be the same. But again, it's all about how you look. Because we're very self-involved people as human beings. I want to get into the next pick that I also looked at. Was they had a moment where they actually... Man, in fact, before I even... Yeah, nah, it's good. I could go there with it right now. The next pick I thought that really stood out about the series was the fact that when he told her what... Actually, he didn't tell her, actually, excuse me. One of his advisors was letting them know that, yo, look, if you look at the polls, people were on your side. But as soon as her finger turned up, because they show him her tied up, he goes around back, cuts the finger off, and shows it to the screen, and sends the finger to the location of wherever the prime minister was located, so he knew that he meant business. Because initially they were gonna green screen a face, his head over somebody else's face to perform the sex act to get her out so he wouldn't have to do it himself, which was actually smart. But somehow he got wind of that and said, I told you, no visual trickery. Went back online on YouTube, went behind her, girl was screaming, and he presents the finger and lets you know he just straight up cut off the princess's finger. When they noted, when you see that, that's when you knew it turned up, and then that's when the pollings went through it, and you noticed that the advisor lets him know that, look, your polls fell so badly, people are gonna start to assume that you're being selfish, and if the princess turns up dead, it's possible. It basically is possible that your family might actually be at risk. It'll look like they'll look at it as being a selfish act that you did not perform it. Another pick I also had was the way they showed the people all across the nation watching the sex act as it performed. One dude was smiling through it. No, this is history. History? History. And there were people that watched this. I think after the first pump or so, like, he did it. Why are you watching this? And I get the compulsion to want to see it. And even if you felt compelled, it was this weird attitude and air around it, because it wasn't like watching some weird shit out of interest. This was sheer coercion. This was rape. And the way they took it was like, this is okay. And I don't want to bring in gender dynamics, but I almost feel like the reaction, if had it been a woman, would have been very different by the public. Even though it's a series and we know these are not real people, it was just watching it made me really realize that that's how that some people would make light of it, make jokes of it. Let's be for real. We're some evil motherfuckers when we want to be. Like, when bad shit happened, you could go on Twitter and see the shit that people say out their goddamn mouth, which is just like, why would you even need to go there? Like, this is a bad situation. When Kobe passed, how people dealt with it, like, almost immediately. And I'm glad it was a lot more positivity, and a lot of those people got backlash. It just illustrates how that's the first thing we try to do. What can we make advantageous out of this? How can we make this a salacious story via the reporter? How can we watch this and make jokes about it because the prime minister is getting humiliated, and part of humiliation is people pointing and ridiculing you and feeling disgusted or even just laughing at you. And all of that was densed into that series, which made you see the ugliness of human beings, even when you knew he was being coerced to do so. That's why I said, like, I could see this really happen. That's why I think it's not too far of a stretch if you would have seen a woman crying when that happened, while she had to perform a sex act the other way. I don't think anybody would have exactly been glued to the TV to watch it. I don't even think there would have been much smiles or anything. And the next pick was the big twist, which wasn't a twist, but the big twist was that they found her after he did the act. They found her stumbling in the city, heavily sedated and whatnot. They rescued her, bring her in after the prime minister is in the bathroom throwing up and not answering his wife's call because, like, what could I tell you, mama? I've just been emasculated, humiliated, and destroyed. And most importantly, inwardly, I've been gutted. And I have to come back and look at a woman that I actually love and look you in the eye. And you have to still see me as your protector. And the funny thing is, little did she know he was. But to wrap up the twist, which I will also select as a pick, is we find out that she was released 30 minutes prior. He didn't have to do that. She was already released. And I noticed, when I noticed her hand was a bandage, no blood, I was like, he didn't cut her finger. And Lord and behold, he did it. She was free 30 minutes before he even went down there to do the act. So the way they shot it was, you see everybody watching on TV, and then you realize you pull back from one TV and you see a guy hanging just from like bottom down, and you notice his hand is bandaged and bleeding. We realize that was the killer. He committed suicide. The finger that was delivered was his. Because at the end, after my man is vomiting, his advisor was saying, yo, DNA testing found out that finger wasn't even hers. It was a guy, it was a man. It was the killer. When they found her unharmed, all of this, he didn't have to do it. That man killed himself already. This was a statement. That was it. And the last pick, which now we could take it into a tad lighter, was when the woman wanted to change the channel, everybody all worldwide was watching, and my man was like, nah, this is history. I heard someone said this shit was going on for an hour. I don't know if it was in demand to fuck for an hour. I don't know how he fucked for an hour. I don't know how he did that shit for an hour. Is what it is. I don't even know how he got it up. I don't know if that was Viagra they gave him. I don't know. But yeah. That being said, now, during the credits, you wind up, you see a year later, they doing the polls and stuff like that. The princess is pregnant and stuff. Pregnant a year later. His polls are up like, I think, 3 point something percent as opposed to from it was the year prior. It seems like people have moved on. And I think that was very relative to human beings, especially in this microwave age. You will get humiliated and destroyed, and people will move on and care about destroying somebody else. Like it's weird. It's very weird. But yeah, pregnant with her boyfriend, with a kid with a boyfriend, and she's ready to move on. We see the prime minister and his wife, they politicking, they on camera doing a lot of things, and they're talking. Dang, a year later after that humiliating thing, though, it seems like he's bounced back unscathed, and that's what they were saying between the credits while they were showing the clips. And then the way it ends, when he comes home and the cameras are gone, and she goes upstairs and he's at the bottom and he's calling to her, and she doesn't even turn around to acknowledge him. It's not, he could look good on TV and all of that, but everything that was intimate in his life, in his world, in his heart, everything that he had, his self-respect and all that is gone. His life is never the same. His relationship with his wife is never the same. And that's how it ends. And I had to sit down and hold that shit. Now here goes some of my nitpicks now. How the fuck was he supposed to do that shit for hours? I don't know if that's realistic. That's why when he took whatever he took, unless that was a fucking and I'll watch it again. I'm not exactly sure if that was supposed to be a Viagra to make sure he could keep it up or get it up so he could even penetrate. And I'm assuming that's what it had to be. I couldn't do that shit for an hour. So unless the instructions was to do it for an hour. I just don't know how he did that. Like that was the only thing. Like the hour joint. Like I don't know if I would have added that. That was a little bit of a nitpick for me, man. And I feel like I had one last nitpick for this story, and it kind of eludes me because like I'm still like it's still resonating with me in terms of just the human aspect of how people took it as funny that he should fuck a pig, and it was all I don't see that shit as funny. Some jokes we just don't need right now, you know. And if you look at the date and time in which I talk about this in terms of the world that we're living in right now, the era that we're living in right now, on April 27, 2020, when I'm recording this, and hopefully I could get this out to you guys. I won't say hopefully, but the aim is to start shooting these out like during the week. This week, you can see its relevance on some sort of level, no matter what political stream you're on. And I don't bring politics to here. Like, I don't think it's a point to it. My thing is to be very objective, but you'll start to see this shit when it comes to leadership. It's a balancing of ethics, appeasing your constituents and your supporters, and beyond that, even if you're a leader, the supporters of the people that you lead aren't the only people you're leading. You're still leading the people that don't support you. And it's up to you to decide how you go about facilitating that as a leader. That's why, like, in our nation, they have a zero policy of negotiating with terrorists. And it's an easy, higher concept to it. The moment that you actually kowtow to them, that means that you'll never stop seeing terrorism at that kind of level for a ransom like that. Stop. Because then anytime something happens that you don't agree with, all I have to do is kidnap you and put a squeeze on you. If you make that a rule that's unwavered, it'll always make anybody less inclined to test that. There'll always be someone that will try. But if your rule is strong on any account, so matter the ramifications of it, it's less likely to happen because they'll know for a fact. Them niggas, they don't negotiate with terrorists. Nah, well, if we do this, that's the rule. Well, if I go, we've been there and did that before. That's a rule. Almost like a fucking law, not to negotiate with them. And I think, if anything, this kind of expresses to you the mathematical reason why, on some sort of level, depending on how far you look into this. But I believe that another nitpick for me was and maybe it's just because I don't like it, which is good though. But a nitpick for me was the fact that the wife, she was so fucking what about me? What about me? He was the one that was humiliating by proxy you, but he had to do it. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because I'll be honest with you, man, it was kind of needed, but it's one of those things that just bothered me, because it was like, damn, man, like, she's cold. Like she'll understand this shit ain't an easy decision for him. Far be it from him for it to be an easy decision. And my last nitpick really was who delivered the finger. And like, I understand when you're in emotion, the first time you see it, oh shit, that's a finger. But no one showed him cut it. That's why I made a point in the non-spoilery that he goes behind her and then he produces the finger. When he found out what he was doing with the trickery, he chopped his finger off. The only question I have was that pre-recorded just in case? And was he dead already by then? But I don't think he was. They said 30 minutes prior to the guy showing up there. So I'm sure he was alive and still did it. But I think when he came back around her, I think he had no intentions of harming her. This was just to prove a point. So he went around and said, oh, you ain't going to do that? He came around. He already was prepared to cut his finger because he already knew he wasn't going to live regardless. But who delivered the finger and at what time? Unless he left a note somewhere. That's the thing. Like, that's the thing that throws me off with the finger part. Through street cams and stuff, you was going to have to be able to triangulate how this finger just shows the fuck up. That's why it makes me wonder, was the finger already extracted? He pre-recorded it already and was ready to let that shit release. Otherwise, it's going to be hard to understand where that finger came from. But for a film, for a series that's like in a short format, I'm not really mad at it. That's why we call it the nitpicking section. And that's what's one thing that bothered me. Like, how does finger just show up? No one's who delivered it. Like, how do you deliver the finger? But I think he already had cut that shit off and set it up. He set all of that. I think all of that was recorded before they found out the princess was released. And he videotaped all of that shit and was ready to go with it. So when they acted the fool, he was going to submit the next thing, upload the next joint on YouTube. The next video with the finger being extracted. And then you could go, oh shit, he really means business. But by then, the wheels were already in motion. And I think, if you ask me, he might have already been dead at that point. Because she was already wandering the city for 30 minutes. So when he probably showed up on camera and started doing what he was going to do, he probably watched part of it and said, fuck it, and sent her on her way. The finger was delivered probably wherever they needed to find it. Probably an hour before he even uploaded the first video of her being kidnapped and being held for ransom and issuing the ransom. But like I said, that's just a little bit of a nitpick, but that's really all I gotta say. I really enjoyed this episode. It was quite a dark joint because it really dealt with humiliation, and I think that was the darkest part of it, just the humiliation factor. How far will you take humiliation to save a life? And in this instance, he was doing it maybe not just for her, the princess, but it was mostly his family, because that was a deciding factor that, oh, if you don't do this, she turns up dead, the life of your family may be at risk by the public. And he was like, you know what? I'll do it. The question is, what would you do? Leave all your discussions, what you think were your major picks out of this series, or this episode I should say, and your nitpicks. All your nitpicks, leave it down below, and let's just chop it up about this episode. And let me know what you would do. Like, share, subscribe. See you next time. And as always, till I have a better outro, chill.